Hey everybody, I'm Chef Ryan Jennings and you're watching Plant Powered here on Eat This TV. This is a very special episode. We are going to be preparing a wonderful holiday feast, great for whatever holiday you celebrate. That time of year is just so wonderful, getting together friends and family to enjoy a meal together. And we're gonna have kind of a showstopper of a dish. I think that this would suit any holiday table. Because there's always going to be at least one person who wants a plant-based option. I think this would satisfy anybody who tried it. So today we're going to prepare one of our signature holiday dishes from Sweet Pea Plant-Based Kitchen, a Beet Wellington. So traditionally, this would be served with a fillet of beef, right? So a tender piece of beef, they make a mushroom duxelle. Oftentimes there would be truffles and foie gras involved, all wrapped up in puff pastry and baked in the oven. Until crispy and delicious. So we set out to make our own version of that at Sweet Pea. And so in place of the filet mignon, we're going to use beets to make a loaf. And then we are going to make our own version of duxelle with some beets and mushrooms. And then that key component of truffle, we're going to use some Sabatino truffles to make our own version of a Perigord sauce. And that's what we're going to start with first. So here in this pan, I have several quarts of our mushroom stock. We make that by slowly cooking down roasted mushrooms, covering them with water, and then we introduce a sort of an interesting ingredient, which is kombu. That's seaweed, often used in a dashi in Japan, and it adds sort of like an umami element to it. And so that's what we got here, and we're just going to infuse this broth and cook it down to a nice glaze before we puree the truffles in at the end. So to do that, we've got a few mushrooms here, and we're just going to quickly slice these, just to reinforce that mushroom flavor. And we'll add that in right there. We're also going to add a few other things to kind of up the umami of the broth. We've got some wonderful rosemary and lemon thyme from our friends at Full Moon Farm up in Ontario, New York, close to Rochester, where I spend my days. And so we've got this beautiful lemon thyme here and some rosemary, and we're just going to throw this in whole. All these things are going to get strained out later, so you don't have to be surgical about any of this. And then we're also going to peel a little bit of carrot here. I'm going to grab a bowl. I always like to keep a bowl around to catch your trimmings. These are all wonderful for vegetable stock or for infusing your stock later on. And it also helps keep clean while you're cooking away. And so for this, again, we're just gonna cut it into a very rough chop, nice and thin so it quickly infuses the broth. These root vegetables are easy to cut with the help of these nice glass-stained knives. We get ours through Corinne, wonderful knife store in New York City, but you can also get it online through their website. I'm also going to take just about half a branch of celery here and just again quickly slice that. And a little bit of garlic, again from our friends up at Full Moon Farm. They grow some of the best garlic I've ever tasted. But your local farmer's market over the summertime and into the fall should have a bunch of garlic. I like to stock up. It does last quite a while. And we're just going to take those crushed just with the skins on, no problem, and add those to our broth as well. The other thing we're going to do here is add some coarsely ground black pepper. So we use these Kuhnreikern pepper grinders at Sweet Pea because I've never found one that works better. We also use their peelers. Very quick and easy to use. You just saw me make quick work of that carrot. So we're just going to put this on the stove and let it reduce, and we'll be right back. Okay, so the next part here is we're going to make our beet and mushroom duxelle. So this is going to coat our beet loaf before it gets wrapped up in our pastry dough and goes into the oven. So to do that, we're going to start with some onion. So here, just going to take one end off, trim the end here, and then go through the center. And we'll just take the outside off here. And these are all good to save for stock. Probably just need about half an onion for this. So then, yep, cut in here about as thick as you ultimately want your dice, and then come back this way. Onions are stored best outside of the refrigerator. They retain their flavor a little bit better that way. But if you want to cry a little bit less when you're cutting them, stick them in the refrigerator or the freezer for 20 minutes or so before you cut them, and it'll cut down a lot on the tears. Okay, we'll just place that in our sauteuse here. Sometimes when you're doing something like this where you're not sauteing on high heat, it's good to have the pan near you, especially if you've got a stove that's not directly next to you. We can just place them in there, and once it goes on the stove, it'll cook down nice and slow. So we're also going to prepare some beets for this. So beets, obviously, beautiful rich color, but it gets all over everything unless you're careful. So we've just got some disposable gloves here, and little sheet of parchment paper. So parchment paper is nice because it can go right in the compost when you're done if you have a service like that, and it'll help keep your station here nice and clean. So we're just going to take this beet and just peel off the outside skin. This is also something you could do if you had, maybe some extra leftover beets that were already cooked. You could substitute cooked ones for this. There's also a wonderful brand that was founded up in Rochester where I live called Love Beets, and you should be able to find them at your local grocery store. And they have all sorts of wonderful beet products, marinated ones, cooked ones, so big fan of those as well. And for this, we're just going to cut this down into small pieces so that we can throw it in our food processor. Buzz that up. And then you'll see here, take this, mess disappears, like we never did it at all. The other crucial part in the duxelle, and the most traditional item there, are mushrooms. So we've just got some cremini mushrooms here, but you could use the ones that you like. But I would save use kind of like a workhorse mushroom like cremini mushrooms, bud mushrooms, portobello, something like that, rather than using something more expensive like morels or chanterelle mushrooms. Because ultimately these are going to get ground down into kind of a paste almost, and you'd rather use something like this than one of those more expensive varieties that you want to showcase their flavor and their the general look of them. Good. So we've got this here, the beets, and then the last thing we're going to add is a little bit of garlic and some herbs here. So we've got some more of our garlic here from Full Moon Farm. Just a few cloves I think should do. We're gonna trim off the end. We can save those. Fun little trick for garlic too. If you've got a ton of this to peel, as I've had to do sometimes in my career, grab yourselves a couple of bowls like that. Throw all your cloves with the root end trimmed off, and just shake it vigorously in between. And the skins will come right off. But for a couple cloves here, doesn't make a big difference. Good. So we're just going to throw these in our food processor here as well, and buzz these up. And so we don't want to grind it too much. You don't want it to be a pure paste. You want it to have a little bit of texture left. And that's what we have here. And then we'll just add this to our pot here. Good. And then we'll just add a little bit of some fresh herbs. So we've got some lemon thyme here. With thyme, or any herb really that's fresh and on the stem, to peel or to pick the leaves, it's always best to pull towards the root end. So that's just going to take those leaves off, leave the stem intact. You can save those for stock. And you'll kind of notice this is a through line throughout this show. We're always trying to find a use for everything, right? Like this herb here was carefully grown by our friends Patty and Steve at Full Moon Farm. Carefully picked and sorted through and washed and brought to us. And so as a chef, you know, the best thing you can do is find the best ingredients, treat them with respect, and try to make them delicious, right? So we're always trying to find a use for everything, whether it's an herb stem or a carrot peel, because in the end, that's what we've been put here to do, right? So I think that's enough lemon thyme. Then we're also going to take a little bit of rosemary. Good. We'll just quickly chop this up. So when chopping herbs, you want to make sure you have a very sharp knife. Chopping anything really. Because if you got a dull knife and you're beating this on the cutting board, you'll notice that at the end there's all sorts of green on the cutting board, and that's all the taste and the essence of these herbs. So I like to do it as quickly as possible. There we go. And then we can just pop it right in there. Now we're going to take a little bit of the mushroom stock that we've got on the oven, or I'm sorry, on the stove, and add it in here and just kind of cook this down slowly until we've got a nice paste to put on top of our Wellington. And when we come back, I'll show you how to put it all together. Okay, welcome back. Our duck cells have simmered down nicely, and we've got it almost into like a paste at this point. You want to make sure it's very low moisture, but also to help it adhere to the beet loaf, we're going to add just a little bit of oat flour. And so that's what we've got here. We're just going to add a little bit, and this is just going to help bind things a little and make sure it adheres to the beet loaf. So in the end, when we go to slice it, we get a nice presentation. Okay, we're also just going to check the seasoning at this point. Make sure. Does need a little bit of salt. And some pepper. Okay. So now we're going to assemble our beet loaf. What we've got here is a dough that I prepared ahead of time. It's the actually the dough that we use to make all of our burger buns at Sweet Pea. So it's just a mixture of our sourdough starter, water, whole wheat flour, and some sweet potatoes. And that gives you kind of a nice soft feel. And we've just got a little bench flour here, and just want to dust it so it doesn't stick. You want to see, I know that this is ready to use now because it's about doubled in volume. So our sourdough starter is what helps get it to do that, because all the wild yeasts that we cultivate by feeding it every day get you there. You could just use regular yeast if you don't have a sourdough starter at home. So you just want to make sure that this is lightly coated with flour. Got a rolling pin here. And we want to just get it to be about 1/4 inch thick. You'll see this dough is nice and pliable. That's really what we're looking for here. And you also can tell that this is ready to use. You can see that as I'm rolling it out, it kind of pulls back a little bit. That is the gluten that we've developed in the dough. But it mostly holds its form. So if this was really pulling back at me, it needs to rest a little bit longer so that gluten can rest and it'll hold its shape. Just a little bit more. It's actually just a little bit more dough than we would need. We could probably make 2 out of this, but we'll save the rest for another use. Okay, so now again, we just want to make sure that this doesn't stick as we prepare this, so we're going to lightly dust it with flour, flip it over here, and we just want to make sure it moves nicely on the cutting board, and we're all set there. So this is our beet loaf out of the oven. It cooked for about 1 hour, as I mentioned before. And we've got our duck cells here, and we just want to coat the outside on top to give a nice kind of layer here. We can finish molding it as we get the dough on top. Okay. You'll see now that a little addition of the oat flour is helping it adhere nicely to the beet loaf. You just want it to be even. Save that. This duck cell is wonderful as a little appetizer on toast. You could use it, yeah, for pretty much anything in that appetizer form. Even added as a condiment for like roasted vegetables or different things. It's very versatile. So we can save the rest of that for something else. And then we are going to just gently fold it into the side here and wrap our dough around the outside here. So we'll just kind of measure and then cut the excess dough off. So mentioned we can save that for another use. You know, it's a pretty versatile kind of hearty dough. So, you know, you could roll this and form it into an extra bun or a small bread loaf, just to make sure we're not wasting anything. And because it's soft like this, we're able to avoid using egg wash. Obviously, we're not going to be using any eggs in preparation of our plant-based meals here, but this dough allows us to do just that. And there we are. Perfect. So our Wellington is going to go on a baking tray right now. We're going to put it in a 400-degree oven. It'll take about 25 to 35 minutes to cook. We want it to be a nice golden brown shell. And when we get back, I'll show you the finished dish. All right, welcome back. So as our sauce is simmering away, I'm actually just going to turn it down just a little bit. You can hear those little chef senses going there. Now we're going to make the base for our beet loaf. So this is going to be the center of our Wellington, and then we're going to cover it with the duck cells and pastry later on. So we'll start with the vegetable base. So obviously beet loaves, we need beets. And for that, I'm going to make sure to wear some gloves here so that we don't make a mess of ourselves. And we'll also use a little bit of parchment paper to keep our board clean. And in the end, we can just put the trimmings into the compost. I haven't really found a good use for beet skins. They tend to be a little bit bitter and again have, you know, a very dark coloring. So I usually just add them to our compost. We have a wonderful partner in Rochester, New York called Impact Earth Organics. They come to Sweet Pea every week and take all of our vegetable trimmings and brown paper and vegetal waste and compost it for us. You know, there's more and more of these services coming up around the country, and it really does reduce the amount of trash that you're sending to the landfill. So I highly recommend finding that. And also many municipalities these days are doing that sort of thing for you. So we're just gonna, cut that down into smaller pieces so that we can get it into our food processor here. Because this is gonna help grind up all these different vegetables into smaller form so you don't have to spend all day chopping. Okay. So, just clean ourselves up a little bit here, and then we'll get the rest of our vegetables here. So we got a little bit of celery, some carrot, a bit of onion, and some mushrooms. So these are all just going to get roughly chopped here because they're going to go right into the food processor and get buzzed up here, so we don't need to worry too much about how they're chopped. And then we've also got some cremini mushrooms. You could use the kind that you like here. And it's best with mushrooms too. You may find a little bit of dirt on them. So all you want to do with that is take a damp towel and just kind of wipe them off, wipe them clean, because mushrooms are sponges. So if you were to immerse this in water, it would soak up all the water, kind of lose the delicate flavor there. Yeah, these are pretty clean. We did do some work ahead of time here. The other option you have is to peel them, which is fine as well. And for that, you just take kind of a small knife and peel the outside skin off like this. And then that's great for stock. But yeah, these are just, again, cut into some smaller pieces just so they chop up nicely. And these vegetables will be the base for our loaf, along with a few other ingredients. So this is a little bit of an involved dish, as you can see. There's several different components, and each component has different components. But I think around the holidays, it's nice to kind of challenge yourself and put on, you know, a meal with the holidays should be a spectacle. You know, your guests should see it and think it's a special occurrence, a special thing that you're doing just this one time a year. And that's why I always like to really try to make it special. And that was the whole intention behind coming up with this dish, so that we could serve our clients at Sweet Pea something that they could give to their families and friends, and something that they could really enjoy and know that it was special. We're going to add a clove or two of garlic. And that will just get buzzed up in there. And we'll start with this. Okay, so now this is chopped up nice and fine. That's what we're looking for. Just add this to our bowl. Watch out for those blades, always nick you. Yeah, and for this too, feel free to sub whatever vegetables you like. I mean, I would recommend root vegetables mostly, and not too much green stuff, but we are going to add a little bit of kale to this. But you know, if you wanted to do this with parsnips or celery root, we're going to serve those things on the side. But you could use what you have, especially, you know, when you are in the summer months. I know that's obviously not around holiday time, but you could make something like this at that time. You'd want to use the things that are at the farmer's market, what's freshest. But those roots are something that store well over the winter, which is why we're choosing to do that here. So we've got this. We're going to move on to a few more ingredients. So this is some seitan. Seitan is basically vital wheat gluten, so just the gluten out of flour that's been mixed with oftentimes soy sauce or tamari, a few other things, and poached. It's a great meat substitute. I will use it in place of like ground meat, and I think it actually gives you a better texture than the traditional animal proteins. And it really takes on whatever flavor you're cooking it with. So, you know, we use these in like a lentil or a bolognese sauce. I think earlier this season we prepared dan dan noodles, a Szechuan dish with it. So it's really versatile, and I think that you will find it that way too. We've got some cooked kale here, and that has just been blanched and shocked. So for blanching, big pot of boiling water. Salty, should taste like the sea. Blanching the vegetables until they're a bright green color, and then transferring them to an ice bath to lock in that color and flavor. And then you can, you know, use it from there, and it helps keep that color. The other thing we're going to add here is a little bit of tofu. This is from our friends at Soy Boy. They're a company, Northern Soy, that's based out of Rochester, New York, where I'm from. So it's wonderful to have this nice local product for us, but you can find it most any places and online. They use all organic soybeans. It's a wonderful product. We use it all the time at Sweet Pea, and I suppose you could use another brand, but why? So we're going to take just a little bit of this and save the rest for another use, and just cut this up again into smaller pieces so that we can blend it down quickly. Perfect. So even just this part looks great. It'd be a wonderful filling for pasta or the like. Add a few other ingredients and season it up. Good. Perfect. Okay. So to complete this portion, we've got a few other ingredients. Right here we've got some ground flaxseed. So it's great high in omega-3 oils. Also good as an egg substitute because it will help bind the loaf itself. This is some oat flour. I like using it in this application because it binds things well, but then has a little bit of a different texture. So we're going to have a nice slice on the beet loaf when we're done. This is some whole wheat breadcrumbs. We make our own at Sweet Pea because we make all of our own bread. And just any of the old stale ones, we grind them up and let them dry out. The key when you're doing that yourself is you want to make sure that those things are nice and dry before you pulse them. And then we've got a bit of black pepper from our friends at Kuhn Reichen, a little bit of salt, and then this is our version of Worcestershire sauce. So traditionally that would have anchovies in it, but ours of course does not. It's got more ingredients than I think you would like to make at home, so I'd highly recommend the Wizard brand. It's easy to find in most grocery stores these days. Another thing we're going to add here is a little bit of garlic puree. So this is something we keep around at Sweet Pea, and you'll see me utilize it a little bit later when we finish our sauce. But basically what we've done here is we've taken garlic cloves that have been peeled, brought them up to a boil 3 times, and then roasted them in the oven at 350 degrees for about a half an hour with a little bit of tamari until they're tender, and then pureeing it up. And it's nice to add a more subtle garlic flavor to things. It's great in vinaigrettes. It's nice to add a little bit of body to a sauce, and it's just kind of a workhorse in our kitchen there. So we're just going to start mixing this around here, and you just want to make sure that everything is well incorporated. And then you'll see that There was a little bit of excess moisture from the vegetables, mostly from the onions. They have the most moisture of all those vegetables, but you can see that all of those ingredients that we added to this to bind it up have just done that for us. And that's what we want. You want to make sure that there's no excess liquid in this, and it just looks like a nice kind of nice burger type consistency, veggie burger type consistency. It's great. So from here, I'm just going to pack this into a loaf pan, cover it with tin foil, and bake it at 400 degrees for 1 hour. And when we come back, I'll show you how to finish the Wellington. All right, welcome back, everybody. So while our Wellington is in the oven, I'm going to show you how to finish the garniture for all of this. So we've got our infused mushroom stock here that's been simmering away for a little while. And I just want to strain out these aromatics right now into a separate pot so that we can further reduce it down to where we want to end up in the end. And so we'll just return this to the stove. And then to serve alongside this, I thought we would make some glazed root vegetables. So, you know, around holiday time, there's not a whole lot growing usually, depending on where you are. Certainly not for us in Rochester. So you have the kind of cellared root crops that are great. So we've got some wonderful turnips from our friend Dan Kent of Kent Farms in Canton, New York. Kind of funny, one day we work with a wonderful company in Trumansburg, New York called Regional Access, and they give us the ability at Sweet Pea to access about 180 different farm and vendor partners throughout New York State and some of the surrounding states. And when I was in high school, oddly enough, my folks moved up to Canton, New York, where my mom was a professor at St. Lawrence University for many years, and they got their weekly CSA from this place called Kent Farm. And so my dad was always telling me about all this wonderful stuff that Dan produced up there. And one day, when I got my regional access order, I looked at where a bunch of the root vegetables came from, and they came from Kent Farm. So check them out online. I know that they come down to the Green Market in the city here. And yeah, wonderful spot. But there are so many like it all around the country. Just find the best, most local produce and treat it as well as you can. So we've got a turnip here, and you'll see how I'm kind of peeling this a little bit more than I would be something else. There's an extra little layer on turnips that give it a little bit of a bitter taste. So if you just peel it a little bit more, you'll see it pretty easily how there's that extra layer around the skin. And that will help reduce some of the bitterness and give it just a little better flavor so it's not so dominant with the other vegetables overall. You don't have to worry about that so much with little baby turnips. There's like the little Tokyo turnips, that variety that I'm particularly fond of, and those really just need to be washed. The skin's perfectly edible. And so here, we are just going to trim that off and trim that off. And then we have this nice little celery root or celeriac here. This I tend to just peel with a knife. And these are also, the skins are wonderful for stock. They give it a very unique flavor. And so we're just gonna, you can see on the outside here, there's this sort of ring around it, almost like you're looking at a cross-section of a tree. And so that's where you want to kind of go for the peel, because that's the same as a turnip there. You get a better flavor with that. And these peelings here are wonderful for stock. We've also used them to make soups. So if you cook those down and puree them, they work out wonderfully. So now we're just going to try and cut them down into some kind of fun shapes. We'll just cut these into kind of wedges here. The turnip probably into kind of similar size pieces. You want them all to be, they can be a little bit different shape, but you want them to be the same size so they cook at the same rate. And then here with our carrot, we'll trim the ends a bit and go kind of down the middle here with it. And then maybe we'll just cut these into sort of offset like obliques. Sometimes, you know, it's just fun to cut something in a little bit different shape that your guests maybe aren't expecting, because it just adds that one little sort of flourish that they didn't know they needed. We're also going to add a little bit of celery here. I find celery to be sort of a criminally underused vegetable. It's always around, and you know, most folks are used to eating it kind of raw in a salad or something like that, or I'm using it, you know, in soups, kind of chopped up. But I like to have these sort of nice big pieces cooked with other vegetables. It's also a very inexpensive ingredient. The base, the hearts, get very tender and sweet when they're cooked down in a broth. We love to braise them at Sweet Pea. And then, you know, they would be great with the duxelles that we're making here today as a little crust with breadcrumbs roasted in the oven. There's all sorts of fun different things you can do. And so I was just peeling that just to get a little bit of, you know, it gets a little bit stringy. And I think this will give it a little bit better texture. So for these, we'll trim off this end and cut these down into kind of a diamond shape. And then, yeah, it's nice to have something a little bit more on the green side here. Great. So we've got this. Our little sautoir here. And then we're going to add a little bit of salt. I'm going to use a little bit of white pepper for this. And then I've got a little bit of maple syrup. And so this is going to add a little bit of sweetness and a nice little help glaze the vegetables a little bit. And then we are just going to cover this with a parchment paper lid and add a little bit of water and simmer it down while our sauce finishes. And when we'll be back, we'll be able to plate the entire dish. Okay, welcome back everybody. Our sauce is reduced nicely and our root vegetables are just about finished cooking here. So we're going to show you how to finish the sauce, and then we'll go through and plate our dish here. So we've got our handy dandy Vitamix blender here. You know, we use this thing more than probably any other piece of equipment in our kitchen at Sweet Pea. We have several different varieties, larger ones, smaller ones for different tasks, but they're, you know, peak craftsmanship, just workhorses. We use them for everything. You know, cooking plant-based, we need to do different things sometimes to achieve the textures that other folks might be able to get with butter, cream, dairy products, cheeses, different things. So having this to help us puree a variety of different things, whether it's vinaigrettes, whether it's this sauce, something else, it's really a huge part of our kitchen. So we've got, this is our mushroom stock that's been infused with all those different aromatics. And then we've got our garlic puree here. And I'm just going to add some of that. And so that garlic puree, it's going to add sort of a mellow garlic flavor, lots of umami. This is already packed with quite a bit. And then what we've got here are some summer truffles from Sabatino. They're what we use throughout the year. They're a wonderful product that add that great sort of earthiness that we love from truffles, and there's no weird stuff in it, so big fan. And so here on the blender, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, always make sure your blender is on low before you turn it on, especially one that's as high powered as this. really all it takes to incorporate that. Got our nice jus here. So we'll just leave that in here for a moment. Let me grab our vegetables. And we're just about there. I'm also going to show you the piece de resistance. We've got our Wellington here. So this is what came out of the oven. It was in there for about 35 minutes. You remember, so we already cooked the beet loaf, so that was already set. The duxelles, again, set. We used a little bit of that oat flour to help bind it and get it on there. And they're really just looking to get the nice sort of golden brown on the crust. So we'll just take that here. And you do want to wait probably 15 minutes or so once you've taken it out of the oven before you start slicing it. But I think we can just about go to the plate here. So holiday time, I always like to make sort of a grand platter, right, for everybody to see, and then maybe they can serve themselves or you can serve them. But if you want to go for that like last little bit of making it a special occasion, I'll make the grand plates and then plate them for each individual guest. So first we'll start by cutting into our Wellington here. So important there, nice sharp knife, but then you can see the wonderful layer of duxelle, the wonderful beet loaf that we have in here, and our nice crust. Also when slicing these things, you want to keep a little kitchen towel by the side there so we can make sort of nice, neat slices as we go. I like a serrated knife for this part. Just helps with the crust and making sure that we get a nice smooth cut. And when slicing here, you really want to let the knife do the work for you. You don't want to be applying too much pressure because you'll break the delicate crust. Good. Okay. And then keeping it all together like this is also helpful when you're carving it. So yeah, this large Wellington here probably feed 8 to 10 people depending on the portion size and what other items you had for the meal. You could really serve as many as, I don't know, 16, I would say, if it were a little bit smaller portion. Perfect. Okay. So I think we'll save the ends for the chef. And place the other ones on our platter, just kind of nicely shingled here. Voila. Then we can have one that is just for our special guest here. Just trimming this up to make it look as nice as possible. That final presentation. Okay, let's grab our root vegetables. See here, these are just perfectly cooked down and glazed. We'll just check them for seasoning quickly. Perfectly seasoned. A little bit of sweetness from those that maple syrup. Just a nice amount of salt, not too much, just makes the root vegetables taste their natural flavor. And I did throw some of that lemon, thyme, and rosemary we've been using throughout the cooking here in there as well, just whole, so we could pull it out easily at the end. So we'll add some to our nice platter there. And then make sure that when we plate for our guests, we include a little bit of everything so they can taste all the different flavors of these root vegetables, because they do all have their own individual flavor, even though we've cooked them together. And then we've got our sauce. So I'm just going to actually put this in a little bowl so it's to be a little bit neater in our preparation here and we're not making a mess. And so we'll use this a little bit over our vegetables. You see, this is just a nice consistency now that we've added our garlic puree and black truffles. With sauces, you want them to be what the French call nippant, which means it should just coat the back of a spoon. We'll add it to our finished dish here. Make sure to get a bit on our Wellington. Always tidy up our plate before we go to the table. And here we have just a marvelous holiday feast, one that would sure to be a showstopper at your next gathering. And so, I'm Chef Ryan Jennings. You've been watching Plant Powered on Eat This TV, and happy holidays.